Does Masteron give you a hard, dry look that everyone talks about? Yes, it does, but only under this condition that most guys miss. With summer around the corner, guys are looking to get absolutely shredded. And what better compound to use for that very purpose other than Masteron? So this video is going to be how you can slot it into a cycle and how it makes you feel when you actually take it, from someone who's used it multiple times as part of a TRT regimen, as well as traditional cutting and bulking cycles. First of all then, why would you use Masteron over other compounds? Is it stronger? Not really. Is it safer? It's definitely on the safer side, but I think the most appealing reason is that it's the only neutral compound. What do I mean by that? Well, most other anabolics will affect estrogen. They'll either lower it, like primobolan and boldenone, or they'll raise it, like D-bol and nandrolone. But for most guys, Masteron doesn't actually impact estrogen levels at all. It's true that Masteron can have mild anti-estrogenic effects by increasing androgen receptor signaling, which can shift the body towards a more androgen-dominant environment. As a result, even if estrogen is present, the likelihood of expressing estrogenic side effects like gyno is reduced. There's also some discussion online about it suppressing the ERA, or the estrogen receptor alpha, and although I couldn't find any data to support that, I do have anecdotal evidence that might support that claim. Last year, I stayed on Masteron as part of my TRT regimen for about 6 months. And during that time, the small amount of gyno that I did have reversed itself and completely disappeared. And to this day, it hasn't returned. Now, was it Masteron doing that, or was it a metabolite of Masteron? I've no idea, but it does add credibility to the bro science claims online that it does have some interaction with estrogen receptors in breast tissue. So for Masteron itself, and why I like the compound so much, is that it's a pure androgen that's going to raise total androgen load without affecting estrogen all too much. Now, the advantage of this is you can use Masteron to artificially manipulate your androgen levels while your estrogen level stays locked in at a certain value. So what does this actually look like in practice then? Let's say for this example, someone is using 150 milligrams of testosterone a week, and via aromatase, that's putting their estrogen at 150 pmol per litre. So on the higher end of the normal range. And let's say they're getting all the benefits of estrogen, good libido, IGF-1 production for growth that you would expect at that value. Now let's say this individual wants to increase their androgen load and bump their testosterone up to 300 milligrams. Yeah, that would work, but it would also proportionately raise their estrogen. Because remember, estrogen follows testosterone. As testosterone raises, so does estrogen. As testosterone drops, so does estrogen. So you can see the potential problem here. Yeah, you can raise your testosterone to increase your androgen load, but that's also going to increase your estrogen. And at some point, it's going to reach like this tipping point to where you are going to run into high estrogen issues. And this is where Masteron can play an important role. Because it's derived from DHT, it doesn't have the ability like testosterone does to aromatize. So it functions as a pure androgen that doesn't impact estrogen levels. So we have the same individual as before, and this time they're going to add in 150 milligrams of Masteron instead of just increasing the testosterone to 300. The estrogen level is going to stay locked in place, but now they've increased their androgen load with the Masteron so they can get additional progress and performance enhancement out of that without estrogen moving. An issue some guys run into though is that the bigger the disparity gets between their total androgen and estrogen load, the more likely it is that they'll run into what I call high androgen symptoms. Everyone's heard of high estrogen symptoms. What I'm talking about is negative high androgen symptoms. What are those? Acne, hair loss, aggression, body hair growth. So the bigger the disparity gets between your total androgen and total estrogen load, the more likely it is you'll eventually reach a point, which is different for everyone, where you do start running into those issues. And I think this is where the myth that Masteron itself being so notorious for hair loss comes from. And this is coming from a bald man, so take it for what it's worth. But I believe that it's not actually Masteron binding to hair follicles and causing hair loss. It's that the total androgen and estrogen load have become so disproportionate that the body is now operating in a more androgen dominant environment, whereas in nature it's important to remember that these systems are balanced and linked closely by aromatase. And this is where experimentation with dosage is key. Don't listen to people prescribing doses saying things like, oh, you need to run, at least 400 milligrams of Masteron to even notice anything, or it's a waste of time. Everyone reacts differently, and there's no cookie cutter one size fits all approach with this stuff. I got great results a couple of years ago running 250 tests, 250 Masteron, and that was all I needed personally. With that said though, here's a rough guideline to get you started. For myself, and for guys that I've coached that have used Masteron, most of them don't have an issue running a 1-to-1 ratio with testosterone. Personally, when I use this amount, I feel absolutely great. And when I have used a dose of testosterone that would be normally too high for me without an AI, with Masteron in the picture, I can actually get away with it without an AI. Another thing I hear a lot when Masteron is discussed is that it gives a unique look to your physique. Does Masteron give you a hard, dry look that everyone talks about? Yes, it does, but only under this condition that most guys miss. You need to be lean enough to actually observe the hardening effects. And if your body fat is too high, you won't notice it, or it'll be subtle at best. How lean do you need to be then? If you're just after the cosmetic effects of Masteron, I would say 10% body fat is the cutoff. Yes, if you do have higher body fat, you'll still get other benefits from Masteron, like increased recovery and higher protein synthesis rates. But here I'm strictly talking about the cosmetic hardening effects. It's noticeable at 10%. It's very noticeable at 8%. And at 6%, the difference in physique refinement that Masteron can provide is night and day. So all of that sounds great. But what are, if there is any, the negatives of Masteron? The worst one, in my opinion, is the moderate effect it can have on HDL, the good cholesterol, more so than testosterone at an equivalent dose. But I'm of the belief that it's not actually Masteron directly doing this. It's the increased disparity between total androgen and total estrogen load that is the root issue. And I think that can be said for most of the side effects typically associated with Masteron. My personal opinion, Masteron is an S-tier steroid. It's almost the perfect steroid. Not because it's the strongest, on a milligram to milligram basis, just comparing how strong a compound is. Something like Trenbolone absolutely shits on it. But as we know, Tren comes with its own set of problems that Masteron doesn't. I would go as far to say that Masteron is so versatile and benign that you could slot it into almost any cycle and you'll see benefits from it. There's also a feel-good factor to Masteron as well. For me, and I've actually heard it described like this from other guys as well, but it seems to have almost a nootropic-like effect. I find that my mood is just generally better. My focus is increased and I'm just more mentally there in the present and less likely to be in my own head, ruminating and overthinking. Masteron also increases my drive. I find there's just less resistance around discipline. And for me, the way I can describe it is that if I'm not actively and aggressively improving every aspect of my life, it gives me this uncomfortable energy, almost like an itch that can only be scratched when you can actually say to yourself, you know what, that was a productive day. My spatial awareness and reaction times are also elevated when I'm on Masteron. And the way I notice this is because I find that my mind-muscle connection is improved to a noticeable extent. Anavar and Winstrel do the same for me. This translates not only into better workouts, but even things that you don't think about on the surface until you actually take it. And the way I discovered this was from video games. I'm just generally better when I'm on Masteron. So I could easily see how this translates into things like martial arts. So this is a compound that would be great for pro fighters, strikers in particular, you know, MMA guys, boxers, kickboxers, Muay Thai. Not that I condone cheating in sports, but just putting this out there as a fact, guys, you are going to see improvements in reaction time with Masteron. I would say as well, for anybody considering using Trenbolone, Masteron is almost essential because it's such a feel-good compound that it can effectively counter some of the craziness and negative mood issues that are commonly associated with Tren. With Trenbolone, your mood can be very volatile and it can shift very quickly. I don't think it's as bad as it's hyped to be, but it definitely does exist, and this is why guys talk about aggression problems with Tren. When you add Masteron to that, what you would expect is for things to get even worse because you've just further increased your androgen load. But from what I found is that Masteron almost smooths out the volatility of Trenbolone, and the result of that is you feel a lot more grounded and relaxed instead of just being all pent up all the time. Unfortunately, Masteron is harder to find and source than it was a couple of years ago. And when it is available, it's almost doubled in price. And this is due to the shortage caused by the manufacturers of the raw powder in China being shut down. So because of that, there's a lot of bullshit Masteron out there that's really just testosterone. So really do your due diligence and research when you are trying to find a source. Speaking of which, what a great time to insert my shameless plug. I do have a sourcing service, and I also offer coaching and consultations. If you are looking to get into incredible shape, I can help. So if you do want to work with me, check out the blog enhanceplayer.com. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.